Let's now have a look at the triggers behavior class. First method we're going to create here will be called isNonAjax. So static is non-Ajax, and we'll get the behavior as an argument. So behaviour, and here we're going to return. We're going to have an array of different behaviors. In this case, it will only be one, but with the time you may have some other behaviors. For now, it's going to be just a method called goTo. This will be representing one of the behaviors, and we'll check includes and the behavior that we got through as an argument. If this behavior is included within this array, then that means it's a non-Ajax call. But now, rather than returning an array straight away here, why don't we just extract it to a method? So static, let's say non-Ajax, and then we'll have it separated. So we return, and we return this array. And now what we're going to do is use behavior and non-Ajax and then includes. So we don't have to modify this method. We will just add items to this array of this specific method here. Okay, so that's isNonAjax. Now next static behavior, this same method will be called redirect. So redirect, and it will take trigger, which is the instance of the given class. In our case, it's going to be multi-checkbox trigger here. If you can remember, we are passing instance of itself and then the response. So trigger and then the response as the second argument. And here we'll simply go window, location, href equals and response data URL. So that's when we're going to redirect the user when they've clicked and we received the response from the server. The next one will be static also, and this time we're going to be reloading the page. So reload method. We don't need any arguments, even though they will be passed through, but we don't use them, so we don't have to specify any. Then window, location, reload, and yes, we want to take a fresh version of the DOM. So reload with the true as an argument. And the next method will be called goTo. So static goTo, and it will take a trigger and then data. And now trigger, as you may remember, will be instance of our multi-checkbox trigger, which extends Ajax caller. And on this Ajax caller, we have a method property, which by default is set to post. So from within this behavior, what we can do is check if trigger method triple equals post, then we are going to delegate the call to another method, behavior, and the new method will be called goTo post, and we pass trigger through as an argument as well as data received. Otherwise, we are going to call it a very similar method, which will simply be, rather than post, get. Okay, let's create both of these. I'm going to start with get. So static goTo get, and we get trigger and data. And here what we're going to do is window, location, href equals, and we're going to go for trigger, action, concatenated with a question mark, and now we need to convert the data, which will be the items that we're actually passing through as an argument, because this is a non-Ajax method, the get one. So we're getting items. We need to convert them to the get request, the query string. And in order to do it, we are going to use a helper. We'll add the method. As you can see, this has automatically been imported by my IDE, so make sure that you import it as well to this class. And the method which we'll add there will be called array to query string. And we're going to pass data and then trigger name as the second argument. Let's copy the name of this method. Let's open our core and helper class, and let's add this method right at the bottom. So static array to query string, and it will take an array. I'm going to call it collection, and then a field name. And from within this method, we are going to return our collection mapped with the callback functions. So value as an argument, and then arrow function. We will join all these separate elements with the and symbol. to obviously build a query string. Now return from within the map for each item in this collection. We are going to use the field name, concatenate it with the array symbol, and then equals, because it's another item in the array. We need to encode each item, so encode URI component and then the value as an argument. So to make sure that if there are any spaces, they are properly encoded. So this method will return something like this. If, let's say, we have an array of 1, 2, 3, this would return something like string 1. Sorry, wrong. And the field name would be, for instance, items. So items array equals 1, then concatenated items array equals 2, and so on. So that's what we would get for the query string. Okay, so that's our array to query string method. We can save and close this helper class. Our go to get method is now completed. The next method will be go to post. So static go to post, it takes trigger and it takes data as well. Now with post, what we need to do in order to get the input and redirect user with this input using post method, we need to generate form fields. So first of all, we need to have a form, then generate input for each of the data item that we want to send with the request, and then send them over there, basically just submitting the form. So we are going to start with a new variable. So let form equals document create element, and it's going to be a form tag. And let's now append it to the body. So document body append child, and it's going to be form. And now we're going to specify the method for that form. So form dot method equals post, and we're going to have form dot action equals trigger action. And again, this is coming from within the Ajax collar. If we go back to the Ajax collar, we have the action as the property. And now the next thing I need to add, because I'm using Laravel, is the CSRF token. So I'm going to check if window CSRF token, then we are going to add it. So behavior input method, which we'll add in just a moment, which will generate the input, form to which we need to append it, the name, which will be token in this case, and then we're going to take window CSRF token. So that's going to be one of the inputs. And now we don't have the CSRF token on the window, but if we open our Bootstrap, you'll see that we are actually obtaining this from within the meta tag. And we are associating it with the XCS default headers property. So what we are going to do here is prepend it with window CSRF token equals, and then obviously the same statement as it was before. So in one go, we're going to set the global CSRF token on the window as well as provided for the XCS purposes. So save it. So that's now going to be available here. Then the next thing we need to do is for each of the field, we need to add them as well. For each of the inputs, the data items, we need to generate the input as well. So for let value of this time data, and let's use behavior, we're going to use input method again for this form, and the name will be trigger name concatenated with the, let's just put it because it's going to be an array symbol, and then the value we want to associate with this input. Now using for of loop, the value represents the actual data item of the given collection rather than the index, which is the case with the for in. That's why we can pass the value straight in as an argument. Now at the end of all this, once we have the form and all the fields included, all we have to do is to submit the form. So form submit. Now we are still missing this input method, so let's add it. Static input, we take the form to which we are appending this input, then name and the value. And here we're going to start with a new variable. Let me just scroll up a little bit. I'm going to create a few new spaces so it's going up a little bit. Let input equals document create element input. we are going to use this input now to set the type of it to hidden, so it's not shown within a page. And then input name, we are going to say it's going to be whatever we're sending through as an argument. Then we have input value, will be whatever we pass through as an argument as well. And then form, we append to it this newly created input. So append child, and we pass input as an argument. Now let's remove this redundant space at the bottom. And we can save and close this file as well as this one. Let's open our event bus, because I want to do a small refactor here. We are using for in, and we're passing the index to either fire or listen event. And then we are pulling the value by its index from within this events collection. Now using for off, we could simplify this a little bit. So let's just do it. For off, and rather than index, we are going to have value right now. And let's now change this index to value. And rather than pulling this from the collection, let's just pass it straight through. So value goes as that. Okay, same here. Value bus on, it's going to be just value. Just a small refactor, which is making things a little bit easier. Okay, so if we save and close this file, the next thing we need to do is to register our new components. So let's open components.js. And after our form trigger, I'm just going to duplicate this line and change it to multi-checkbox trigger. So it's going to be multi-checkbox trigger. And that's coming from a triggers, multi-checkbox trigger. Okay, save it and close it. And let's now recompile the assets, npm run dev. And once everything has compiled, let's go back to the editor. Let's open multi-checkbox index.blade, and let's scroll right to the top. We are going to now add this multi-checkbox trigger. So multi-checkbox trigger. And we are going to add a few properties here. First one will be the group, and it's going to be multi-checkbox. Then we're going to have a disabled attribute set to true, because when the page first loads, none of the checkboxes is going to be checked. Then we're going to have behavior that I want to use with this particular button will be reload. Next, listen property, which will listen for the select single event that's fired by each of these individual inputs. Then the last thing we need is the action, where what we are going to be calling. So action equals, and we have a root here ready, which is multi-checkbox checkbox, and it's destroy root. And now for the button itself, we are going to use a span with slot scope represented by the props property. And then we're going to have a class, and it's going to be alert button. Then we'll have a class disabled applied when the props disabled is set to true. And then on click, we want to handle this with the props trigger method. Okay, and within this span, we'll have another span with a v if statement. Will check if props processing is set to false. Then we want this label, which will be the icon with the class fast var times var fw, and the label remove. Let's just duplicate this and change it slightly. And otherwise, so v else will have the icon spinner with a far spin, so it's rotating, and then label is going to be processing. Okay, if we save it and let's go back to the browser, refresh the page, there we go, our button is disabled now. If I select any of these items, you can see it becomes enabled. If I select them all as well, if I uncheck them, if there's one item unchecked, it also goes to disabled. If I just checked one, now before I actually click the button, let's move it to the bottom so we can actually see the network and the call. So if I click on this, you can see the button, the destroy endpoint is being called, that's been sent, a page reloaded, and the confirmation displayed. So that's working fine. Let's now go back to the editor and add the other button. So I'm going to duplicate this, and this time we have a disabled set to true as well, but we're going to provide the name for this one, which will be lowercase name records, because this is the name that's going to be used with the query string. So all records will be sent as records array. Multi-checkbox, that's fine. Behavior this time is going to be go to single select, and rather than destroy, the endpoint is going to be export. Now for our slot itself, we keep everything the way it is. Now rather than remove, it's going to be export label, and rather than times icon, it's going to be download, and the spinner is the same. Okay, save it, preview it in a browser, refresh the page. You can see the color of the button we could change as well. So let's just go back. Rather than having alert, we're going to have a success, for instance. Let's go back, refresh. Now it's green. If we now select all of these items or just a single one, the same as with the remove button, that's all working fine. I'm going to select all of them. Click on export, and that should redirect us together with the inputs to the new page using the post method. So click on export, and if we select all rather than just XHR requests, click on export, you'll see that the request method was paused, and what we've sent was records array with 1, 2, 3. That's what's being displayed within the browser window, because that's what I've set it as from within the controller of the Laravel. Now, one other thing I would like to happen, if we just go back, is when I select these items, you'll see that when I click the remove button, I can still interact with them while the request is being processed. That's not quite how this should work. So let's go back to the editor, and I'm going to change it. What we are going to do is wrap this table, which has all these checkboxes, with the form wrapper. And this form wrapper will have a group, which will be the same as these multi-checkbox triggers, which is this multi-checkbox. So we can group them together. Just join this given form with both of these triggers. Now, if I just do the indentation here, and let's close it right behind this closing table tag. For the table, I'm going to apply slot scope, and again, we're going to use props here. And all I need to do now is to add disabled attribute to each of these checkboxes. So disabled, and it will equal to props is disabled, the property on the form wrapper. When we click on any of these buttons, it triggers the event to disable given elements which are associated with the same group. The form will listen to this event, and it will disable, set its property is disabled to true, at which point all these checkboxes will turn to be disabled. Let's just apply this disabled flag to all of them. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. And if we now save it, and let's preview everything in the browser. If we refresh, let's select all of them, click on remove, and you can see all these buttons are now disabled while we are processing the request. When the request is completed, they become enabled again. Okay, the same thing I've applied earlier to the main form. So if we fill in the form with some data, hit submit, you can see all of these items are now disabled once the form has reloaded. So the response has been received, the fields become enabled again. And again, a few things we've touched upon during this episode. One of them was array map method, which you can find at the developer.mozilla.org. Then we also used encode URI component. Then we also use create element of the document object, as well as append child to the node.